The advantages were all with their enemies, in prepared positions along the heights. An Austrian officer said,
"The scenery was really marvelous. Just imagine on top of a 6,000-foot mountain, something which tourists come from far away to see. But from the military point of view, the position was marvelous. We saw everything that went on. We saw every step, every tree in front of us. And we thought if the Italians should attack, they can't get through."
It was not against the Alpine barrier to the north that Italy made her effort in 1915. Instead, General Cadorna, the Italian Chief of Staff, threw his forces at the Carso, the high plateau blocking the way to Trieste. It has been called an enormous natural fortress, a howling wilderness of stones as sharp as knives. At the foot of the plateau ran the river Isonzo. 4 battles of the Isonzo were fought during the year. 4 times Cadorna sent his men over the river and up the gaunt, bare hillsides, where every shell burst flung out deadly fragments of stone as well as iron. The Austrians, heavily outnumbered, made full use of their advantages of ground. 2 battles fought in June, July, and August cost the Italians 60,000 men, and the map showed no change. 2 more battles in October, November, and December produced small dents in the Austrian line, but Italy lost another 117,000 men. Cadorna had stated his doctrine:
"The Supreme Command desires that in all times and in all places an iron discipline should reign throughout the army."
The iron discipline of war swiftly seized the Italian soldiers in a merciless grip, and their losses of 180,000 men had hardly advanced the Allied cause at all. In truth, the cause was not advancing. At the far end of the Mediterranean, on the Gallipoli Peninsula, the last British landing, the last big attempt to break through the Dardanelles Straits, came to nothing. The defeat at Suvla Bay in August spelt the defeat of the whole enterprise. As the summer of 1915 wore away, it became clear that nothing that the Allies could do on minor fronts would avail to check Germany's run of victory. The Western Front was never still. Somewhere or other along its 475 miles, in Champagne or Picardy or Flanders, there was always some action, always danger. But between battles, if you were lucky, if you were in a quiet sector, life might not be too bad.
On a nice summer's day, it would, well, you could think there wasn't a war on, really. Looking through the periscope out to no man's land, you'd see the sandbags of the German front line, you'd see the grass and the flowers out of the front. The birds would start singing if the sun was up on a nice day. Early in the morning, you'd have the first planes coming over, and a general air of balminess and ease. Breakfast would come up if there was going to be any. You'd settle down to a day of laziness in the sun, if you could. The lads would sit along the fire step and talk and sing. coming towards the evening, they get sentimental, talking about their homes. And then there was old Cornet Joe over in the German front line who used to blow his cornet and play to us the British songs. And he'd play a song and we'd shout over to him, "Damn good, Jerry. Give us another one, Joe." He'd ask us what we wanted, and we'd say, "Well, give us the old Bull and Bush." He'd play that, and we'd sing it. But during those summer months of 1915, you could forget that there was a war on. You really could. And it did happen sometimes. People would forget and get careless, and before you knew where you were, they'd have got a bullet through their head on the latrine or something like that.
Snipers. Even during quiet periods when there was no battle in progress, the British were losing some 300 killed, wounded, and missing every day. It was a new sort of British army that was coming into existence now on the Western Front, Territorials, and the first of Lord Kitchener's new army divisions, beginning to take over from the old sweats, their good humor and their endless jokes concealing the inner doubts and fears.
I think you're chiefly afraid, you know, of how you will behave when you really meet the worst things that war can produce. And I became afraid of seeing my first dead man. I'd never seen a dead man. Well, now, I knew that there was an old stretch of German trench between our first and second line where there were a lot of German and Canadian corpses. And in order to find myself, I think, I decided one day I would go and have a look at this and see what I felt about it. And suddenly, around a bend in the trench, I came to a great bay. It was full of dead Germans. But they weren't a bit horrible. They'd been dead for about 6 weeks, and rubber and rats and maggots and everything else had done their stuff. And they were just shiny skeletons in their uniforms, held together by the dried sinews that was round their bones. It was a most weird and extraordinary picture, and I was absolutely fascinated. The skull, you know, grins at you in a silly way. It laughs at you, and more or less said, "Fancy coming here all terrified of dead men. Look how silly we look."
The meaning of war unfolded day by day, each day producing new enigmas. One thing was clear to anyone who thought about it. This war was not going in favor of the Allies. The important advantages won by the German armies in 1914 enabled them to call the tune in 1915. Everywhere they stood upon the soil of their enemies. They could afford to sit tight.
Gepflanzt ist auf mein Grab. Da kam ein stolzer Reiter und brach sie ab. Jubiwalle, alle, 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 alle. Jubiwalle, alle, 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 alle. Da kam ein stolzer Reiter und brach sie ab. Ach, Reiter, lieber Reitersmann, lass doch die Linien stehen. Die soll ja mein feins Liebchen noch einmal sehen. Jubiwalle, alla, 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 alla. Jubiwalle, alla, 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 alla. Die soll ja mein feins Liebchen noch einmal sehen.
had only to wait for the compulsions of war to bring their enemies to them.